author, columnist, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com, talk show host, and conservative policy advocate.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's edition, we are talking the myth of the international world order, Donald Trump's board of peace, and a whole lot more. Remember, Liberty Nation Radio, sponsored by LibertyNation.com. You can access podcasts, breaking news analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. And you're here on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We're very fortunate to have with us this week Liberty Nation's national security correspondent, Mr. Dave Patterson, to talk about all the happenings that are both geopolitical and otherwise. And Dave, I've got to say, it's this last couple of weeks have really been in your wheelhouse, haven't they?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And yeah, they have been. I mean, it's a lot going on in geopolitics.
So I think the main thing that I want to get into today, Dave, is it's really the aftermath of Davos. Now, Davos we covered on the page of Liberty Nation quite a lot last week, but it's really the aftermath where I think people are not the public at large, because generally the public at large are not big fans of supranational organizations unless they benefit directly from them. But the big players, or supposedly big players in these organizations, like the WEF, NATO, the UN, and
International Monetary Fund. And so forth.
Oh yeah, exactly, those guys. But it seems to me that the idea that they're all aghast at this idea that Donald Trump is pushing against the international rules or the international norms. And it's like they've just woken up to discover that they don't really mean anything.
Well, you don't know exactly what's in Donald Trump's mind at any one point, but
sure.
It seems to me that you think you have a globalization, you have a global order here, that you elites sit here in Davos and chat about and pat each other on the back. Well, let me offer an alternative. And I think that the peace board and things like that are his idea of an alternative that is more cordial to the way he thinks and more cordial to America first.
Yeah. So that is, I think it was Gramsci who said, when the old world dies and a new one's born, if it's not ready yet, what you find in the middle are monsters. And I think because clearly many of the globalists are big fans of Gramsci, naturally, this is kind of what they're worrying about. Because let's talk specifically about the international rules-based order. And I know you do have a fair bit of expertise in this topic, Dave, but to me it seems that you've had this what would you call it? You've had this idea where everybody follows the same rules in the world, and people get condemned for not following the same rules, for not singing off the same hymn sheet. But all that was made possible, and this is just my opinion on this, all that was made possible only because all of these countries that say they believe in this international rules-based order is only possible because you had the US with an enormously big stick standing behind, making sure that everybody stayed in their place. And if the United States weren't there, then we would have seen a lot more chaos.
I think that's true. I mean, immediately after World War II, the United States emerged as, the superpower, and nuclear weapons notwithstanding, the impact, the gravitas of the United States, moved things around the world. And so there was, I think, a mythology that grew up around this idea of common shared values, and that democracy will prevail if we just give it enough time, and encourage democratic nations to throw away their the way they've been doing things and choose something new. And I think that it has proven not to be the case. the United States has a view, obviously, of the world in which its opinion matters. And I think that its opinion then constitutes what, we believe as in the United States as the rules-based order. And again, it goes back to this idea of common shared values, which I don't think is true.
I would agree. I would agree. I mean, you're in this position where the world is in this position now, where when Donald Trump left office in 2021, the whole of the whole of the European order, the people in the EU, leaders of European nations, they all said that they all made some statements along the lines, adults are back in charge. Here comes Joe Biden. Then they saw what a disaster that was. But they still spent 4 years, or 3 years, I guess, running Donald Trump's view of the world into the ground. And now that he's back, to everybody's surprise, who are on the European side, they're left with a bit of a reckoning where Donald Trump, I guess he doesn't feel the need to play nice because he knows that their masks dropped when he left office in 2021. And they called him all sorts of names, and they stopped with the civility that really underpins what their idea of a rules-based order is, or international order is. They stopped with the civility. And so he thought, well, it's all a mask for them. And so he's come back in. He thought, why should I carry on with this facade of, we've all got this equal stake in the world, and therefore we should all be consulted equally on what's happening, when really there's only there are 9 nuclear power countries as far as we know. Only 3 or 4 of those are serious players in the world on this, but the power accrues in these single individual pots, and everybody else is doing what? That they're relying on these single individual pots for their protection, whilst lambasting the people who own those pots.
Yeah, I think that, in maybe oversimplification, but
Sure.
You have you have the major powers, you have economic powers as well, which aren't necessarily the nuclear powers. I mean,
Sure.
And so what they want to have happen is they want the rest of the world to sit back and say, tell me what you want me to do. And of course, they're happy to do that. I mean, that increases their globalized power, and they are revered for their wise counsel. And that's what they want. I mean, that's what the globalists want. They want a single view of how man should exist on this earth, and more importantly, they want to determine what that is.
Yeah,
and I think that what Donald Trump does, he says, not so fast. There's another view here, and it's mine, and it matters. And I thought it I was actually surprised at Davos when President Trump came on the stage. He got a standing ovation. I mean, That caught me by surprise. I thought that they would be cordial, that they would be quiet, but they were not. And then and he didn't hold any punches back.
No. Well, there's a bit of a battle of the narratives going around about, and I know this isn't a thing, but who won Davos? And Donald Trump was one contender. The other contender, according to certain segments of the left-leaning media, the other contender for who won Davos would be Canada's Mark Carney. And I have I've got a couple of quotes just from his speech. It was, "We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition." And he said, "If you are not at the table, you are on the menu." Now, he's not wrong, right?
No, I think that there's a certain validity to what he says. But at the same time, you could get to be at the table as long as you're kind of an honest broker and willing to accommodate to the kinds of things that are going on. If you're a small power and you want to be unconstructive in terms of what else is going on, you're going to look like the menu.
Yeah, very true.
And I think that Canada might have stepped in that role with their much publicized agreements with China.
We're actually going to talk about where these mid to small countries are heading after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Andrew back on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain Mark Angelides, continuing our conversation with Dave Patterson, who remains Dave Patterson, Liberty Nation's national security correspondent. Thanks for sticking around, Dave. Now, just in our last segment there, we touched on how Mark Carney may have placed Canada on the menu for its flirtatious overtures with other of the poles of power in the world. And I think that was a brilliant point to come back on, because what we're seeing is after Trump at Davos, and it wasn't just the speech was just the cumulative point of a range of different things. So getting Maduro in Venezuela, taking out Iran's nuclear capability, threatening, and then coming to a framework deal on Greenland. All of these things that Donald Trump's doing, it sort of came to a head with the Davos speech. But what we've seen is that certain countries, and I include my home country of the UK in this, are starting to look at the other powers on the understanding that, well, Trump is insisting on this particular world order that's not the one that we've all globally agreed on. And so they're looking, of all places, they can't look to Russia because Russia's embroiled with the war in Ukraine. They're looking to China, which, if you want a completely different world order or world view or cultures and values, China is the diametric opposite to everything that the Western globalists have been espousing for so long, although behind closed doors, they love the power regime, the overall levels of control and surveillance. But why would they even admit that we should move more into China's orbit? I mean, it's fairly clear that China's as much as I love the actual country of China and the people there, China as a government, as a military, and as an economy, it is not just I guess you wouldn't call it like a cooperative play event. It's what's the right way to say this? Well, let's call it it's competition in the very realist sense, the most brutal and basic sense.
Yeah, it is, and quite frankly, whether Europe wishes to admit to this or not, it is the diametric, as you point, the diametric opposite to everything Western values stand for. And
Need to stand for, yeah.
Yeah, and so what they're making a deal with the devil, if you wish, and I think that they'll live to regret it. They should already understand that they should regret it because they lose all of their intellectual property. They lose so much of the very things that make it that contribute to the EU and Europe generally as an economic power, and they just forsake a lot of things that makes Europe Europe. And I think also you can't look at Europe anymore as some sort of singularly Western in its makeup. You've got this intense migration of third worlders that have come into Europe that has drastically changed the demographic. And so when we look at Europe, it's slightly different than what we used to mean when we said that.
Yeah, well, it's not so much the demographics that's changed, although that is an element. It's the the culture of accommodation towards demographics. Now, I speak specifically of the UK here, but this is true of so many other nations, Germany, France, Italy, especially, where people are just allowed to turn up on a boat, and then the government, rather than sending them back. Now, I know Italy did try to do this, and Matteo Salvini found himself racked up on kidnapping charges because of trying to do this. But the governments of the day, successive governments of the day, have said, "Oh no, well, if you illegally enter the country, then you'll get all of these social benefits. You'll get housing, you'll get medical care, you'll be accepted and treated by the ruling class as just as British as everyone else." And quite frankly, that is the very reason that Nigel Farage's Reform Party is doing so monumentally well. I think they've won 100. They've come top in 180 election polls in a row without fail. And this is because the people at the top have decided that we'll change the culture of Europe in all these individual countries. But of course, if they're all choosing to do it at the same time, that's globalism, baby. There's coordination behind the scenes, most likely at Davos. I don't know, Dave. You tell me.
Well, one of the things that I think you can say is true is that the migration of third world, particularly Northern Africa and Syria, particularly in Germany, Syria, it emphasizes a phenomenon that most quote unquote immigration advocates don't grasp, and that is that migration is different.
Yes.
What is happening is you have these multicultural cantonments that are not assimilated. And so as a consequence, you have people in your demographic that are actively working against the culture that has been thousands of years old. And that becomes a problem. And it also impacts the governments of these nations to be less inclined to grasp, to get back to our original topic, less inclined to grasp the rules-based international order, because it's not part of their culture. It's not part of the way they think. And so consequently, they stand as a barrier to continuing that way of thinking.
Yes, it's the position where, and of course the countries of Europe are getting poorer. That's a reality. They're getting poorer, and a lot of that is because Europe counts for, I believe, the figure is around 60% of the world's welfare spending, with 12% of the population, by the way. 60% of the world's welfare spending is in Europe. And a lot of that goes on this mass migration, which, I think we'll see some troubling things in Europe over the next few years. But we're going to be back with Dave Patterson talking about peace, because that's a cheerier topic, after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio. We're continuing our conversation about all that ails the world and where the world can go from here on out with Liberty Nation's national security correspondent, Dave Patterson. Thanks for sticking around, Dave. I think one of the topics that's on everybody's minds at the moment is the board of peace. Now, I'm not saying that people are bored of peace, but the peace board, as it were. And what Donald Trump has in mind for this. Now, we don't know too much about it just yet, but is it, it's my thinking, and I think you're probably on the same wavelength with this, Dave. Is this an alternative to the UN that Donald Trump wants to head up?
Oh, I don't know. It doesn't appear to me that is his intention. It may be complementary, would you say, to the United Nations, because the United Nations, is this unbelievable hydra that you cut off one of its agencies and two more grow in its place. But I think that it's Donald Trump's attempt to bring some currency in, not money, but contemporary currency to what's going on in the world, where I'm pretty confident I share his value that the UN cannot, has not, and won't do that. And he wants to bring, I think, different leaders into the forum for his peace board. And what, as best I can tell, his notion here is to have a forum that actually, with the powers and the leaders that are involved, can actually do something. It's a board of directors.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and so he does not fail to, he never disappoints. He always establishes something that looks like a company.
Well, he sees himself as the ultimate CEO. That's how Donald Trump sees himself, and he's brought that into politics and operates in that manner. And I love the way that you put this. This is essentially a board of directors as a company of a company, because what that means is directors make decisions, right?
Absolutely.
And what has been sorely lacking in the world. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump's peace board will ever get off the ground, or if it does get off the ground, it'll be a good thing or a bad thing. But what we have seen in recent weeks and months is Donald Trump as an individual, well, as a representative of the United States, but in his individual capacity as president, has determined to do things and then gone and done them. So, for example, I mean, that's an understatement, right?
Yeah.
He determined, let's take out Iran's nuclear capability. Now, the nations of the world have been quivering in fear of Iran's nuclear capabilities to the point where they came up with the Jacob plan, the joint payments that would go to Iran in order that they do not further develop their nuclear program. So we're paying them millions upon millions, hundreds of millions of dollars from the world, from all over the world, to stop them refining their nuclear capabilities. But here's the kicker, Dave, as you well know, nobody outside of Iran is allowed to go and check that they're not doing it, right? So for years, we've been paying this, what was essentially ransom money to Iran, on the off chance that, you know, they might get angry with us on some pretext and decides to cause damage. So Trump goes in, singularly, not him personally, but, you know, he takes the decision to send it and go and destroy the program. Nicolas Maduro, he's hosting Hezbollah terrorists on, I can't remember the name of the island. I want to say
Margarita Island.
Margarita, not really the Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville, I can tell you. Hosting Hezbollah terrorists, flooding the world with drugs, kidnapping, killing people, and the world laments. And they lament and they say, what can we do? Well, there's nothing we can do. And then Donald Trump, okay, well, there's something I can do. And I think that what he's trying to do here with the Board of Peace is get a bunch of countries together who are not afraid to act individually, but with tacit support from the other members. I think that's really what it is. I don't think it will be let's spend a couple of $100 million on research into transvestite bats. You know, this is about. I think this is what it's aiming to be: is that here is a problem in the world. Here is a way we can solve this problem, at least in the short term, without too much damage to ourselves or the wider world.
No, I think that's right. And Donald Trump is transactional.
Yes.
And I think that he's looking for a board of directors that will be transactional as well. And he comes to the table with success. I mean, that is the thing that I think that separates wishful thinking of organizations like the United Nations and Donald Trump. What successes does the United Nations come to in bringing peace in the last 10 years? None. Zip. Nada. And in fact, in most cases, they exacerbate the problem by being there. And Donald Trump, that is not his operating mode. He goes, he fixes it. And he's right. He's brought peace to, he calls it 8, some call it 7, conflicts around the world. But he's done it in a very interesting way. He doesn't bring them the idea of peace for peace's sake. He brings them peace because if they don't, he's going to tariff their goods and cause them to go into bankruptcy. And they say, we don't want that. I guess we'll choose peace.
Yeah, it's Donald Trump puts up with a lot of mockery from the world press. Say, well, this one wasn't really a conflict. This one was more just like a border spat kind of thing. And they mention some far-flung places that, a lot of their readers probably haven't heard of or really know anything about the countries, more so than heard of. And they never say, but then, of course, maybe we can discount these, but there's no more war in Israel. I mean, that's a reality. There is no more war in Israel as of today. Let's preface that one. Let's put a caveat in there, Dave. As of the time of recording, there is no war.
Israel.
And
the 30 years war in Armenia and Azerbaijan. I mean, that killed millions of people.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not trivial.
No.
And bringing peace to that region is quite an accomplishment. No one else has done that. And no one else, and I think this is an important point, no other nation has stepped up to facilitate the peace talks between Russia and Ukraine.
Sure.
Before Donald Trump, there was talk about it, but nobody stepped up to do it. And so I think that when Donald Trump says, I think we'll have a board of peace, I think people should listen to that. I think they should, it should pique their interest.
Yeah, it's actually strange that they're not. So far at that time of recording again, I think there are 17 countries who are willingly, openly involved. And there are some that have outright refused. And it seems to me that it's a funny equation, isn't it? You've got these world leaders who say, we want peace. We're peaceful people. We want a nice global order where everybody's at peace and people aren't being thrown off their land, killed, all sorts of terrible things. And then they've got Donald Trump, who has a proven track record of being able to bring peace to situations. This year, it's not like he had a record 20 years ago of bringing peace. This year, he's shown that he's effective at ending conflict, bringing people to the table. He has a track record of it that is enviable to anybody. And he says, come and join this group and we can work together and do more of this together. And they say no. And they say no because it's headed by Donald Trump rather than, somebody magnanimous and well-liked like Klaus Schwab or George Soros. Final thoughts, Dave.
Well, I know, and I think that actually that's a problem that is problematic here in the United States. I make the case, as many have, that Donald Trump could cure cancer, and these people would say, well, cancer's not so bad. So what? You didn't do anything. Well, I've cured world hunger. World hunger is not so bad. The whole world is fat anyway. And, no matter what he does, and it's a outshoot of what we've come to know as Trump derangement syndrome, but it has to do a lot with envy. He does things they can't do, and it really makes them angry. And he's willing to do it. And I think that it goes back to this notion of things happen positively when you have people who come together with a common set of values and a common understanding of what the outcome should be. And oftentimes, Donald Trump is the only one who knows what the outcome should be.
Dave Patterson, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I remain Mark Angelides, as always. And we are continuing a conversation on what's been happening geopolitically in the world, what it means for the established world order, the potential new world order. And we can't escape from that discussion, talking about Greenland. Now, to talk about Greenland and what's been happening there and what will be happening there, we're very fortunate to have with us Michelle White. Thanks for being here, Michelle.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
So, Michelle, we've over the last couple of weeks, we've seen Greenland has received more attention in the world's press this week than it probably ever has since the 40s. And the reason for that is, of course, President Donald Trump has set his sights on being able to. Let's play this out, actually. So initially, he said that he wanted the United States to own Greenland. Now, for those of us who've followed Donald Trump's career even before the presidency, he has this I guess he calls it an art of the dealish type thing, where he asks for everything possible, the absolute utmost limits, just to shock people. And then when they're kind of on the back foot, he ends up saying, eventually getting pretty much what he wants, was probably about halfway on his wish list. And it seems to me that that's the case here, isn't it?
Yes, but I think he does want the whole shebang in the case of Greenland.
Right? Who doesn't? Alaska turned out well. They called Alaska Seward's Folly. They called it
Seward's Folly. Yes,
Seward's Folly. Now look at it, right? It's
right. Right. No, I think in this case he does. Just look at the trail of posts that he has on Truth Social. It's constantly, there's a steady stream about Greenland, and he's upping the ante. I think that was the title of my story last week. He's upping the ante on a Saturday, saying, I'm going to tariff you all 10% more until you agree. And he's not letting off the gas. And I think he's right. You know, we do need it for national security. I'm sure you had Dave on talking about the national security implications of it. Denmark is not doing a good job taking care of Greenland. You posted the poll from several years ago that the Greenlandic people don't want to be under Danish control anymore. They want independence. We just have to woo them over to our side.
So there's actually to go into that poll there. So there's been a lot of talk about how, you know, the Greenlandic people, Greenlanders, they fall under Danish control here. But yes, the polling is that the majority of them, quite a sizable majority, would like to be an independent nation. However, there's a major caveat there, and that is that they would want to be an independent nation. And I think there's only about 58,000 people. 57,000 people. 56
and some change. Yeah.
56 is some change. Well, you don't know about the party they had last week when they found out Trump wasn't going to invade. So they're probably up to 58,000
is it?
The next 9 months. So, yes, so there's quite a sizable majority would like to be an independent nation, assuming that there wasn't a loss in their standard of living. Now, for those who aren't familiar, I know that you are familiar with this, Michelle, but for those of you who aren't, about 50% of Greenland's cash, it comes directly from Denmark. And a few years ago, that was to the tune of so that works out to about $400 million from Denmark to Greenland. And so if you just do the basic maths with it, so that's roughly 800 million in national, well, not national, but island capital per year. Now, do you think that the Americans would be willing to spend, I don't know, 600, maybe 800 million on such defenses like that? To get in the full defense of the Golden Dome, the first line of defense for the Golden Dome? It seems like a bit of a bargain.
It would. I think you'd have to sell it to Congress, depending on who's in control when this comes down. But the benefits of that security far outweigh the cost. So I think, yes, and at the end, when Americans see how China and Russia are building up their military and Denmark is not protecting Greenland and the danger it poses to Americans, I think they will.
Yeah, we actually don't know what the framework of the deal is going to be like. Now, it certainly seems that Greenland will have more boots on the ground. There'll be a lot of infrastructure building, and whenever I think about America's going to build some infrastructure, or any other country for that matter, I always think about the Roman legions, and they would land on the shores of Britannia in the in the early evening. Before they went to bed, there'd be a massive camp with ramparts and defenses before they went to bed, and they would just do that every day. So they always had somewhere nice to sleep. Obviously, that's not quite the case. So yeah, it's much more of a long-term effort here in terms of what infrastructure will be built for defense on Greenland. But you discussed before on Liberty Nation that there is a secondary, although not as important, reason behind why America might want to avail itself of some presence in Greenland.
The minerals, absolutely, the rare earth and elements that are there. And we have them as well in Alaska. We're number 7th in the world. They're ranked 8th. China's number 1. So we definitely want those rare earth elements. They're also important for defense, but it's not an easy task. There, as you know, it's a big block of ice or rock and ice in the middle of the ocean. So the geology is not forgiving. The climate is not forgiving. There's a lack of infrastructure. It's very expensive to extract from the ground. There are other considerations like toxic chemicals and the coexistence of uranium. So this isn't an easy feat. And again, it is secondary, but it is important.
Yeah, I wonder if that will be part of the ultimate framework, because there was talk about a minerals deal with Ukraine, which I believe actually some progress will be made on that this week in particular. But the fact is that Denmark doesn't have the capability to extract those minerals, and let's be clear, it's a fortune's worth. It's a lot of minerals. It doesn't have the resources to actually start that infrastructure project rolling and then to extract. Certainly Greenland itself doesn't. And I guess the 3 players that do are China, Russia, and the United States. Those are the only 3 players who can really utilize what's there. And I wonder if part of the ultimate framework will be that the US supplies either directly or more likely through economic vehicles that allow independent US investment into building up the infrastructure necessary to extricate the minerals without releasing random bits of uranium into the world. And so I wonder if that will be part of the ultimate framework. Is we will help Denmark and Greenland and other European partners who might want to be involved in that, or who have the right position to be involved, because they really don't currently. There'll be some kind of fiscal framework which allows extrapolation of resources, and so essentially everybody gets a little bit richer while America gets a little bit safer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to sweeten the deal a little bit. Well, he's already formed an alliance with Finland for shipbuilding, so I would go there first. The NATO's not very happy with him, but sure, that's a consequence of their own actions. So I don't know if he's going to be able to get that in this, obviously not in this term, but maybe that's something that the U.S. can work on down the line.
You never can tell. And I guess you're right. You mentioned earlier that this whole thing's got to go back to the levers of government within the United States, and that doesn't necessarily include the president of the United States, whoever that may be, because this is a build and a project that will take far longer than Donald Trump has left in office. Michelle White, thanks ever so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I've been your host, Mark Angeles. I'd like to thank our guests today, Mr. Dave Patterson and Michelle White. And of course, thank you, the listeners at home, for taking the time each week to tune in and join us. You are appreciated. Please remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.